Reverend Henry Dawson Ellis Bull moved into the newly constructed rectory in 1862. Built for him and his growing family of 14 children, the house stood adjacent to the centuries-old Church of St. Mary the Virgin. It was meant to be a house of peace and service, but even as its foundations settled, strange events were whispered about. Long before Borley Rectory was built, the land had borne the weight of tragedy. According to local legend, in the 1300s, a Benedictine monastery once stood nearby. A monk there fell in love with a nun from a convent across the fields. Their affair ended in betrayal and death. The monk was hanged. The nun, it was said, was bricked up alive within the convent walls. Though records of such a monastery have never been confirmed, the legend persisted in the village for centuries. Soon after the Bull family moved in, eerie occurrences began. Servants complained of being watched. Family members reported hearing soft footsteps, always pacing the same upstairs corridor. The bell system used to summon servants would ring, with no one pulling the cords. The most famous early sighting came from one of the Bull daughters. She reported seeing a woman dressed as a nun, gliding silently through the garden path near the bushes. The family named it the Nun's Walk. She was often seen walking the same line, vanishing at a brick wall where there had once been a gate. Reverend Bull dismissed these accounts publicly, but privately, he seemed affected. He began spending most of his time in one room, often heard muttering prayers. As the children grew up and moved out, the servants turned over frequently. Many refused to work after dark. One maid left midweek, refusing to explain her sudden departure. Reverend Bull died in 1892 in the Blue Room, a chamber that would become central to the hauntings' later history. His son, Harry Bull, took over and remained at the rectory until his own death in 1927. During Harry's tenure, the activity continued. More sightings of the nun, phantom footsteps, and voices murmuring Latin prayers late at night. Yet the family, perhaps desensitized or resigned, lived with it. In October 1928, Reverend Guy Eric Smith and his wife moved into the rectory. Neither had any belief in ghosts, and the house, though in need of repair, seemed suitable. That belief didn't last. While cleaning a cupboard beneath the stairs, Mrs. Smith uncovered something horrifying, a human skull wrapped in brown paper. It was small and likely female. They buried it in the churchyard with care, hoping to put the matter to rest. But it had the opposite effect. Suddenly, bells began ringing all over the house. Footsteps were heard upstairs when both were on the ground floor. Doors opened on their own. Lights flickered. Furniture shifted slightly when no one was near. Cold air settled in rooms without open windows. Mrs. Smith reported seeing a figure, tall, cloaked in gray, standing at the end of a hallway. When she turned the corner, it was gone. Lastly, a friend who stayed overnight saw a woman in white standing near the foot of his bed. Guy Smith contacted the Society for Psychical Research. They offered to send a researcher, but in the meantime, the Daily Mirror newspaper became interested. They sent a reporter, and with him came Harry Price. Harry Price arrived in June 1929 with notebooks, cameras, and a scientific approach, a controversial figure. Price had already gained a reputation for investigating spiritual phenomena, with both rigor and theatrical flair. From the moment he entered the house, activity intensified. Loud bangs echoed from behind walls. Stones were thrown in empty rooms. A candlestick was lifted into the air and hurled across the dining room. During one session, a mirror shattered as Price entered the room. A séance was held with a local medium. While in trance, the woman spoke in broken French and claimed to be Marie Lair, a nun who had been wrongfully executed. She pleaded for deliverance and kept repeating the words, "Light and free me." Price was convinced that something genuine was occurring, though he remained careful in his documentation. The Daily Mirror published his findings, and interest in Borley Rectory exploded. But the Smiths had had enough. Between the disturbances and the media frenzy, they moved out by early 1930. The church appointed a new rector, Reverend Lionel Foister, a cousin of the Bulls. In October 1930, he moved in with his wife Mary Ann and their adopted daughter Adelaide. For the next 5 years, Borley Rectory became a place of terror. Mary Ann was the central focus. She reported being pushed, slapped, scratched. She was once thrown from her bed. Items were hurled at her: stones, bottles, books. On more than one occasion, she awoke to find writing on the walls. "Mary Ann, please help me. She is mine. Light, bring light." Friends and visitors were not spared. One house guest was struck by a book that had flown from a closed shelf. A visiting priest fled after witnessing a crucifix turn upside down. The daughter Adelaide was once locked in a room from the outside while screaming. Mary Ann tried everything: prayers, blessings, even confronting the spirits aloud. Nothing stopped the phenomena. Reverend Foister documented the events meticulously. He attempted multiple exorcisms with clergies from London. During one rite, the Bible on his lectern snapped shut. The pressure took its toll. Mary Ann's health declined. Rumors spread that she had been hiding affairs, and critics suggested she may have fabricated incidents. But witnesses continued to report real events, too many to dismiss. By 1935, the Foisters left. The house fell empty again. In 1937, Price returned, now determined to launch a scientific study. He leased the house for 1 full year and assembled a team of 48 observers, engineers, scientists, journalists, and teachers. They worked in rotating shifts, maintaining logs and conducting experiments. Among their documented experiences were strange lights in windows, apparitions moving through hallways, bells ringing when disconnected, objects vanishing and reappearing, and rooms turning icy cold within seconds. A seance held in the Blue Room connected again with Marie Lair, who repeated her plea for freedom. Another spirit, naming itself Sunoxamures, claimed the house would burn and that a body would be found. Observers recorded hundreds of pages of logs. Some doubted, others left shaken. Many simply couldn't explain what they saw. Price compiled their reports into his 1940 book, The Most Haunted House in England. 2 years later, on the evening of February 27, 1939, Captain W.H. Gregson, who had recently purchased the rectory, accidentally knocked over an oil lamp while unpacking. The fire spread fast. By morning, the house was gutted. Yet multiple eyewitnesses claimed they saw a face in the upstairs window during the fire. A woman's face, calm, expressionless. 4 years later, in 1943, Price led a final investigation. His team excavated the ruined cellar and found the remains of a young woman, a partial jawbone and skull fragments. He arranged for a Christian burial, but no one knew if it brought peace. Price died in 1948. His work was scrutinized, his methods debated. The Society for Psychical Research conducted their own studies and found inconsistencies. But the core facts remain. Dozens of witnesses over multiple decades reported consistent, physical, and often violent activity in a single house. Borley Rectory is gone, but its legend is not. Visitors to the site still report chills. The bells, they say, sometimes still ring. And once in a while, someone sees her, a gray figure gliding across where the nuns' walk once ran. Some doors, once opened, never close. Some prayers, once whispered, are never answered. And some houses, remember. The end.